my name's Usha Reifsnider. I'm really thankful to have this opportunity to share with you perhaps some ideas of what it takes to share the love of Jesus with migrants, with those that come from other faiths. I myself was born and raised in Britain in a Hindu home. My family came from Gujarat, India, and it was a school teacher that invited me and my family to church and maintained a loving relationship with us and still do to this day. One thing I want to say is that when you share Jesus with migrants, language is not the most important thing. In fact, language can sometimes get in the way because their understanding will be limited. And even if you study for the next 20 years, your ability to discuss complex spiritual, theological issues in a way that they can understand, you'll just never get there. So please don't think that you have to be able to communicate and understand everything in order to share Jesus with those that speak a different language to your own. I would say that one of the most important things about ministering to migrants is to be honest and to be real. Now, by that, I don't mean go in there shaking your Bible and telling people they're going to hell. I mean, go into a relationship as a friend and don't look at migrants as a potential target. Build a relationship with them as people, because you know what? We're not stupid. People can tell when people make friends with someone with a particular reason in mind. So respect and honor them by making genuine friendships and having genuine love and concern for who they are. And if that's difficult for you, then just take your time and let them befriend you. And you try and do the things that you're comfortable with. Not everybody's good at talking to strangers, so give yourself some time. Another thing I want to say is that don't feel that you need to carry all of the burden for racism on yourself. But at the same time, don't feel that you need to make excuses for other people's behavior. It is about your genuine walk with God, your life with Jesus Christ shining through in a way that draws people to you and through you to Jesus. That's what our goal is. Don't be afraid to speak lovingly, but don't use judgment. I feel like I'm giving you a lot of do's and don'ts right now, but it's really important that you don't try to compare religions. Now, we as Christians, we often say, oh, no, Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. And yet, if it is a relationship, that means there's give and take. There's periods of understanding, there's periods of misunderstanding, there's closeness, there's distance. But it's a negotiated relationship that comes step by step. Now, if you want to argue religion and morality, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, they could probably beat you. They would probably have far more moral behaviour in their culture than we as British Christians might have in ours. So don't get into the habit of saying, oh yes, but that's just religion. Oh yes, but you do this and we do that. Don't do that. I don't know of many people who were drawn to Jesus by being made to feel small and worthless and useless. I mean, ask yourselves, how many friends do you have that treat you that way? So if that's the case, then surely, as we share Jesus, we want to share the value of each individual, not just to Jesus, but to you as a person as well. Now, I've been thinking a lot about the coronavirus. We're right in the middle of our isolation time. Well, we don't know. We don't know if this is the beginning. We don't know if this is the middle. We don't know if this is the end. But as I walk through the streets of Oxford, and I'm keeping my 2 meters apart from people and my face covered, I notice that as I walk by and there's two people speaking to each other, they will stop and they'll almost freeze and they'll create a little bit more distance and they just stop talking and we all just stare at each other because they don't know if I'm carrying the virus and I don't know if they're carrying the virus and I don't know if they think that I'm carrying the virus and they don't know if I think that they're carrying the virus. So we're just scared and we just walk away and breathe a sigh of relief and pray that nothing went wrong. And a lot of times, what we're actually hearing on the news, what we're hearing on social media, is what's controlling those thoughts and fears that we're experiencing right now. And that's the case with migrants as well. Oftentimes, there'll be a news report of a person committing a crime. The minute their ethnicity is mentioned, without us even realizing it, we take on a subconscious prejudice. We all do. I've got experiences of white people being racist to me. There are times when I recognize a gesture and I have to wonder. I've had experience of Arabs being racist to me, of African Americans being racist to me. I've had all kinds of negative experiences from men and from women. But a lot of those we can let go. But when it comes to migration in our own country, there's a kind of an unspoken fear. If we vocalize it, we're racist. If we don't vocalize it, we're paralyzed. Either way, it just feels like we're stuck. And so people say things like, I don't see colour. And I know people who make those statements, they really mean well. I just want to share with you, my husband's actually a white American, and we have two children. We have a son, Kieran, who is almost as dark as I am, and a daughter, Tara, who's almost as light as my husband. And sometimes we'll walk into a situation and no one knows us there. It might be a party, a gathering of some sort. And oftentimes, my son Kieran and I, people will come up to us individually, independently, we may not even be together, and they'll say, do you know, I don't see colour. But they don't say that to my husband, Matt. And we discuss this in the car, and what they're actually trying to say to me is that I'm trying not to judge you by your race. I'm trying to not stereotype you. So please, please don't stereotype me. What they want is a shortcut to a relationship, but relationships take time. So when you relate to migrants, don't try to take shortcuts. A lot of times people will come to me and, as I said, I was born in Britain, and they will tell me how much they know about India. It's almost as if they want to show me how much more knowledge they have than I do. And that's not what sharing Jesus is about. When you're in a relationship, when someone has to get the one-upmanship, that actually gets in the way of sharing the humble, self-sacrificing love of Jesus. So I would say build genuine relationships. I don't know how many of you have got South Asian neighbours, but those of you who know Indians, Punjabis, Pakistanis, Gujaratis, Arabs, I would almost hazard a guess to say that they have brought food to your house. And the first time it happens, especially when I was a kid, our white neighbours would look at us as if we'd gone crazy. And sometimes I've heard people think that we were trying to poison them. Yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous, but this did happen many years ago, and still happens actually in certain parts of the US where I've lived. But yeah, people get afraid. And when a migrant brings you food, what they're trying to say is, I want you to share some of my life. What's meaningful to me, I'm trying to share with you. And there are many migrants who have lived in situations of not having much food, and yet they will still share. Because that's our way of saying, your life is valuable to me. And when they bring you that plate of samosa, or that plate of pakora, or some strange looking, tasting sweets that give you diabetes just by one bite. Accept them graciously and never send back an empty plate. Put a bar of chocolate on it. Put a handful of sweets on it. Bake something yourself. If you're baking at home, be sure that you know what their food restrictions are. And I would say stick to vegetarian dishes. It would be the safest thing. Plate of biscuits, or even just a packet of biscuits from the shop. Because that's your way of saying your relationship with me is sweet. It's based on something valuable, because life is valuable. Sustaining life is valuable. That's one way. Another thing you'll notice with migrants is that oftentimes they're misunderstood. And if they have a problem with another white neighbour, they might want someone else to act as a go-between. Now that's very difficult, but they don't want to rock the boat and they don't want to do things that might be unsavoury. So sometimes you may need to introduce your neighbour to some kind ways to relate to other people and to be sort of a peacemaker. This is really hard for British people because we'd rather twitch curtains than get involved. But sometimes, as an ambassador for the kingdom, you may need to get involved, especially if there are cases of racism. Stand up for your neighbour. Stand up. Be that voice. Be that advocate. Be that ambassador for Christ. Another thing that I've noticed is that many, especially first-generation migrants, first generations are the ones that are born overseas and come to Britain as adults. They struggle with the language. They feel embarrassed. They feel humiliated. Speak to them. Don't use your loud English voice. They're not deaf. It's okay. But speak to them and speak to their children and offer to help their children. And don't do it in sneaky ways to bring in the gospel. Let them ask you. Find out what their needs are. And I have never, ever met a migrant family with children, or without children in fact, that doesn't accept prayer. And the reason I said with children is that they are absolutely so thrilled when a white person says, let me pray for your children, especially at exam time. In fact, if you live in an area that's highly populated with migrants, one of the ways that you can build friendships is to go to the school gate. And even if you don't have any school-aged children yourself, walk with your neighbour when they go to pick up their children. Be with your neighbour, spend time with them. Go shopping with them. I know, you're going to feel like you're being taken advantage of. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Everything we have and everything we are is God's anyway. You decide where you draw your boundary. But don't let fear of being used and perhaps awkwardness later on stop you from sharing Jesus. Be generous with your Jesus love. Be generous with your life. Yes, things are going to get broken and damaged, but at the end of the day, is it worth more than a soul? And if it's something that's very valuable, say, no, you can't borrow it. Or no, I'm not prepared to do that. That's okay. Be genuine. Build a genuine friendship. Don't look for 4 steps or 40 days and do this, that, and the other and follow this plan. And this Muslim will stop being a Muslim and they'll become a Christian and overnight they'll change. We want to bring people to acknowledge Jesus Christ as Lord and Saviour and the answer to their sin problem. I want to share with you now, if I may, how I came to faith. It was a long time ago. My dad came to England from India in the 50s, in the 1950s. And when he left India, my mother was pregnant with my oldest sister. And in those days, there was no equal pay for migrants, for whites and non-whites. And so my father worked for 6 years so that he could pay for 2 airline tickets so that my older sister and my mum could fly to England. In addition to that, rents were not fixed, and so people could charge double or triple to migrants and get away with it. So here were these men who were earning less money and paying more to live, and it was very, very hard for them. Anyway, the year after my mum arrived in England, we were living in the West Midlands, I was born. And that was the first day that my dad took a day off work. And the foreman of the factory that my dad worked in came to the house, and he wanted to know why my dad hadn't been at work. And my dad said, my wife and I have a new baby. And my dad was given a 1 penny pay rise. That's an old penny, because I'm really, really old. I'm older than money. Well, older than decimal money. So anyway, my dad was given a penny pay rise, and all of the Indian people around, and this was in the 1960s. I know, I look like I should have been born in the 80s, but that's okay. But in the 1960s, there weren't that many Indian people around. And they all said that I must have been a child of fortune. And when my name was chosen, it was chosen by my parents to be a name of blessing, a name for my, not just for this life, but for eternity. And my name means the light of a new day. So I brought hope to my family. Why am I telling you this? A lot of times, migrants are told to choose Christian names when they change their religion. I beg you, please don't do this. You know, if you look in the New Testament, Apollos remained Apollos. And how many of you have got Christian friends called Diane? So please don't worry about things like that. Please don't try to cut people off from their heritage when you bring them to faith. Anyway, when I went to school, I was 5 years old, there was a school teacher. Her name was Joyce Nind. And she taught at St. Martin's Church of England Primary School in Tipton. And she said to my older sister one day, she said, would you like to come to Sunday school? So my older sister went home and she said to my mother, can we go to Sunday school? Well, my parents were absolutely thrilled because a white woman, a teacher, had come to our house, not to insult us or tell us off or tell us what we were doing wrong, but to invite us to church. So off we went to church every Sunday. And by this time, there were 5 children. Yeah, there were 5 of us. When I was about 7 years old, there were 5 children in the home. And we all went to Sunday school every Sunday, and we didn't have Sunday best. And I think my mum probably sent us just to get us out of the house. But anyway, to cut a long story short, at the age of 11, I heard an evangelist called Don Summers. And he shared the gospel, and he said, if you listen to the message of Christ over and over again, and you don't take any notice, it's like moving house and living next to the fire station. And the very first night, the bells from those fire engines will wake you up. But before long, you'll sleep through it. And I realized at that age of 11 that I had been hearing the gospel for 6 years, and I did not want to become dead to my conscience. So when he asked if anybody wanted to receive Jesus, I put my hand up. And then he asked people to come forward, and so I went forward. And there was a young man there, a counsellor, and he told me about the importance of the decision that I'd made. And he said I had to go home and tell people that when you become a Christian, you have to tell people. So I went home and I told my mum that I had become a Christian, and she became very angry. She said, you can't be a Christian. Christianity is for white people. White people are Christians and Indian people are Hindus. And you're born a Hindu and you die a Hindu. But by this time, I'd heard all the stories in the Bible over and over again. And I said, no, Mum, I want to be a Christian. I want to be a follower of Jesus. So my mother, in her misunderstanding of what Christianity was supposed to be, she beat me and she took away my Bible and she stopped me from going to Sunday school. And a few weeks later, making a very long story short, a few weeks later, the Gideons came and they gave me a Bible at church. And I would love to say that, the film about my life would show that I was a saint from then on. But no, I wasn't. I was rebellious and, did the kind of things that teenagers do. But I had this Bible, and I had this understanding of who Jesus was. And I ended up following Jesus, and I took baptism at the age of 19 against my parents' wishes. But what I did was I separated myself from my Indian family because I felt this is what I had to do. I felt that I had to push everything that was Indian aside in order to come to Jesus. I thought that being Western and being Christian were the same thing. And a lot of us that came to faith from other faiths, and a lot of Hindus and Muslims still believe this, that Christianity is a white man's religion. And for many years, I couldn't reconcile my culture with my love for Jesus. And God in his mercy gave me a way to reconcile with my family and to share Jesus with them. And both of my parents did come to faith. But all this to say is that the message of the gospel is for every tribe, tongue, and nation. It is not up to you to make it English, and it's not up to me to make it Indian. It's up to us to share Jesus, to offer who he is through our love, through our words, through our actions, through our commitment, and let other people find Jesus in us and find the answers to the eternal questions. Then introduce them to the church. Then introduce them to the body of believers. But the light of the gospel is within you, and I urge you to share it with every tribe, tongue, and nation.